We're off and running.
We're off and running
Yes.
with season number 4, episode number something wrong.
Pick a number.
Okay.
Pick a number.
Extension cord that's got to be put away later.
Yeah, I think maybe 42 sounds good.
Okay, 42 it is.
Yeah, or I could be dyslexic. Could be 24.
Could be. Are we going to do word of the day today?
We probably could, but I don't know any ones that would pass the censors.
Well, I propose the word of the day be hypocrite.
Yes, that would probably fit in well with a lot of things that are going on right now. Yeah.
Or if you don't like that, how about fibber?
Well, that's getting awful close to copyright infringement. I think they had a guy by the name of Fibber McGee, didn't they?
Yes, that's true. Okay.
In
Well,
our case, we have Fibber Mark.
fibber mark. Yes. Okay. Well, we'll have two words of the day then. Fibber and hypocrite.
Which at this point I think is pointing to one and the same.
There you go. We've painted our colors to the post. So,
Yes.
ball game, 18 innings for the Cinderella team.
Yes, and let's hope that maybe they've got a couple more wins in them. That would be super.
Yeah,
Tonight's going to be a big color. I think.
it was a long one. It was 3:00 in the morning here when that
Been there a long time, right?
fella finally put us out of our misery.
Well, hope springs eternal, I think.
Yeah, well, it's one of those parable type situations where you have David and Goliath. We have the Cinderella team being David, and the billion-dollar payroll team called Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
And the odds are not good when your Cinderella team has a lot of heart and a lot of positivity around
Yep.
it, and it's
Yep.
up against a bunch that has a lot of money and
Well,
talent.
that's true. And,
Let's be honest, they got a lot of
you
talent.
know, that's true, but as most athletic coaches or team owners will tell you, any team can beat any other team on any given day. So I guess that's where hope springs eternal.
Okay, I think that's probably true, but the analogy of that is not going to work for what we are about to talk about, though, because
True.
our David is getting whacked by the Goliath, and this is not good.
And not just the Goliath. It appears that there is a pack of Goliaths looking to pummel this guy.
Oh yeah, this is. And for those who think we're talking in riddles, we're talking about the current situation that is evolving between our American friends and us up here in the great white north.
Well, and it's not just us against the Americans anymore. We're slowly realizing that it's us against the Brits and us against the Francophones and us against the Italian. My gosh, I think even it's us against Luxembourg.
Oh my God, that'd be. Well, there you go.
Somewhere along the line in the last decade, our credibility was shot out of the water, and voting in a replacement who was basically in the back room pulling the strings doesn't make it Canada's new government. It makes it Canada's same old, tired government with a fresh face. Same policies, same dull, boring, and you've mentioned it before, JV antics. Occasionally a JV team can come through and be just absolutely remarkable. There was a good book a friend of mine turned me on to, the boys in the boat, or the men in the boat, about the U.S. 8 rowing team in 1936 Olympics in Berlin.
There was a movie about that too.
Yeah, wonderful book. And if you like to live in hope and think of good things, that's a really good book too. Probably a good movie. Never saw the movie, but
I saw the movie.
Somewhere along the line, miracles do happen.
There was, yes, yeah. Well, there's no point in us going over a lot of the material that's currently in the press with respect to what's going on following the termination of talks with the U.S. by the president on the U.S.-Canada trade situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot has been made of it. Some perhaps a little over the top, but by and large the damage has been done, and that's the worst part. Because it's going to be, I think, one of those watershed moments in history that people will say 10 years from now, that was the day that Canada made a big boo-boo. And historians don't talk that way, but you know what I'm saying. What were you thinking about? But I think we need to kind of be a little more retrospective about why we got to where we are today. And we were talking pre-production. I was saying that back in the 60s and the 70s, and even before the Mulroney-Reagan Free Trade Agreement, so post-World War II, right up till then, Canada was a country that made stuff for itself.
Yeah.
The discussion was always about how Canada is a small market,
mm-hmm.
a small population compared to its southern neighbor, and it was relative at the time. It was like 20 million people versus 200 million, where today it's 35, 40 million against 340 million.
Yeah.
But in those days, the big discussion among the academics, among the business class, was the realization, whether we liked it or not, that Canada was a branch plant economy, and it was all about we make stuff in Canada for Canadians that's like stuff they make in the U.S., but not for the U.S. So if you remember, at least I do as a kid growing up in Toronto on the lakeshore, we had all sorts of American companies that existed that made stuff. One was Campbell Soup, the other one was Goodyear Tire, another one was White Motor Company. They made trucks. There was the Admiral TV manufacturing companies. Were all along Lakeshore. All those products that they made there were made for Canadian consumers.
Local market. Yeah.
For the local market was from Halifax to Vancouver, but it was made for Canada.
It was a big local market.
That's right.
A local market.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was small. It was self-reliant, and it was keeping within its own sort of capabilities as an economy. Now, yes, we meddled for a little while in the idea, or we dabbled in the idea, rather, that we could build airplanes. Well, we found out that we really couldn't, because we didn't have the ability financially to build airplanes to the extent that we would compete with, at that time, the Lockheeds and the Douglases and whatever. But we did build wings for airplanes in Malton, which then got put on railway cars and got shipped down to Santa Monica, California, and became part of DC-9s and DC-8s. And so, we did do that. And then if you look at historically the industrial base, our industrial bases, we made railway cars that provided the rolling stock for the CNR and the CP. We didn't buy the stuff from the States. We had two small railways in comparison to the behemoths that operated in the U.S., but was our own rolling stock. So we did stuff for Canada. We didn't necessarily worry about can we expand into the United States. Now, there were companies. Obviously, the branch plant thing was that the companies that had the brands on them, whether it was Campbell's Soup or General Motors, they were American companies, or Ford. But the stuff we made at those branch plants was not designed to be made for people in Arkansas or California or Florida or New York. It was made for people from Manitoba to BC to Nova Scotia. That was, and it worked. And so, if you look back on it, what possessed us to go and decide that we're going to have this hugely integrated economy that's going to add variety to the American consumer? Purchasing.
I think that's summed up in one word. It's 3 letters long. It has 2 vowels and 1 consonant.
Na, 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 na.
Ego.
Maybe. Or greed. That's got a couple of vowels.
Well, greed could be, but I think ego started it all. I mentioned pre-production that we're upset now because we're not special anymore. And I don't think we've ever been special.
No,
we've been in a very unique situation that allowed things to happen. Not because they were good, but because they were a bit expedient, or because it met the need. And our egos took over. That made us think that we're special. How dare those Border Patrol guys photograph and fingerprint or take my picture going in and out of the... It's not just you. It's everybody. Terrorists. It's not just Canada. It's everybody. Yeah.
But we always
have to get over that.
Yeah, but now we have a situation where events have overtaken us, and attitudes have become toxic,
entrenched.
Well, look. We always had an inferiority complex, even back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, as a kid, because our southern neighbors just had everything bigger, faster, more of whatever. The first time as an adult, if you traveled to the U.S., it was eye-opening that the amount of stores and variety of consumer products and freeways with 6-8 lanes on them, which didn't even exist, in Canada at the time. So, they're just that. But we understood our kind of place, I guess, as a fairly educated, middle class kind of place. But we weren't competing with Rodeo Drive and couldn't.
Well, no way. We still can't.
And we still can't. And so, I think a lot of the stuff that we came to as a society think about ourselves vis-a-vis our American neighbors was basically made up in our own minds, because they didn't care very much about us then any more than they do now, except for the craziness that's starting, because if you're going to inject this toxicity into the dialogue between two people.
Well, yeah. And that's not to say that we haven't had some good ideas, but it goes to, I think it was Burton Cummings from the Guess Who said, we as a band knew that we would be marketable and we would make money in Canada because Canada had to play our music. So as a band, we had to go to the United States to see if we were really that good. And I think that's also part of the problem is that we do have a lot of good ideas, and I keep on thinking of the one company out here in British Columbia that went to the provincial government many years ago now to try and get a grant to develop a wave generator machine to produce electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Because waves happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, inclement weather or non-inclement weather. It's just almost like a fact of life. It doesn't take up the hills with massive windmills. You don't cover fields with solar panels. Everything is kind of below, out of sight, out of mind almost. But that company couldn't get a grant from the BC government at the time and ended up in Oregon. Now, I'm sure that those things are probably going around the world, that technology, and it's looked at it as an American company, and it probably is, because they are the ones that had the foresight, the willingness, I don't know what word would really fit that, to look at it and say, that's got potential. We've got a government up here now that has blatantly lied, where we're finding out now that Germany came to us with a case to get Canadian fossil fuels to Germany so they wouldn't be reliant on Russian oil.
Yes.
But apparently that wasn't good enough to the former government, and that died.
Yeah, there was no business case for it, said someone who has no business.
Yeah. Very true. So, I guess to the Canadian listeners who might have a bit of animosity towards the United States for whatever reason, I understand why you think that we are special. But the reality is we're not. We have just thought we were special, and we thought we would capitalize on this, and the U.S. is looking after their own interests, as they always have, yes. But it's becoming a little more evident.
Well, sadly, I think we've become victims of our own propaganda, because over the last 30, 40 years, a large percentage of the population has come to believe that we're somehow smarter, more capable, more skilled than our American neighbors, which is a really stupid thing. When you start believing your own propaganda, you run into a problem. What really makes it even more sad is that most Americans don't know anything about Canada. How we thought along the way that there somehow millions of families in the United States sit around at their kitchen table worrying about what Canadians think or do. Yeah, is so bizarre. I don't get it. And yet, we became victims of our own sort of self-importance, because we would emulate and raise to a high platform any Canadian that ventured down to the U.S. and made something of themselves, or whether it was in Hollywood or whether it was in the sciences or whether it was on
music or whatever.
Yeah. And then, you see how, except that if you ask the average American who watched the movies or listened to the music, they didn't know these people were Canadian unless it was pointed out to them. And then they'd say, if it did point it out, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very, very nice.
So,
this was a mistake. Before we go any further, for the Canadian audience who want to brand us as ultra-conservative, make Canada great again people, our problems have magnified over the last 10 years, but it goes way back. It started way back in the 80s, when we had a guy by the name of Mulroney that was there who had an ego that wouldn't fit inside any room that I know of.
Yeah.
And took that to the nth degree.
Well, don't forget, he is the architect of why we're not self-sufficient. He and Ronald Reagan were the architects of the free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada and the U.S. Okay, this clearly in 2025 is no longer a viable setup because it was based on the globalist mentality. Okay, which may have had some kind of sales value back in the 80s. But as time went on, we discovered that there's only a small percentage of the people that actually get anything out of that arrangement. Because the rest of the folks who actually have to do the tough slugging, they're not better off because of globalism, period. Okay? So the leadership of the world is now in the last, I think since the pandemic actually has come to understand the failure of that kind of setup where you're no longer self-reliant. You've got a supply chain that is completely based on
messed up.
Well, it's based on so many points of service that are integrated. If one fails, the whole thing comes down around your neck.
Yeah, I guess the N95 mask would be a bit of an example.
Exactly.
Because you can buy the mask, which is made in China, but you also have to buy the elastic, which is made in India. It has to be shipped here from a container that's built in Japan. I mean, it's just a massive amount of it. It's worse than a spider web, really.
Well, yeah, and it was very saleable back in the 70s and the 80s about things like, let's try just-in-time deliveries for making stuff. And then you find out, well, just-in-time when it's only across town, that's doable. But if just-in-time involves a ship that's bobbing on the ocean, well, that's a problem. And so, all these things in time have proven to have feet of clay after a while because it doesn't. And again, what's the motivation? Well, the motivation is that a very small percentage of the folks at the top of the apex do really well, and the rest of the folks just slug it out. This is not to say that, well, let's turn our backs on capitalism, let's go down the socialist road, because that's no panacea at all either, because we've seen that hasn't worked anywhere either. But they're somewhere between the two extremes. Self-sufficiency is something that really has merit now today in a much greater need than we had before. I say the pandemic proved the point. And so now we have a situation where our salvation, if you will, and our number one trading partner says, look, this is how we're going to do it. If you don't want to be on board, that's fine. Okay? And you can go stamp your feet and get all mad about it, but this is how it is. It's one of those David and Goliath situations, or as the other analogy that the Idiot King's father said, it's you got the mouse and the elephant. The mouse has to scurry around, otherwise it gets stepped on by the elephant, and it's finished. So I guess we're coming to the point where we better kind of get a grip here. And stop this. We're into this saving globalism kind of approach. Well, I don't want to save globalism. I want to save Canada and let it become self-sustaining and live within our means and stop trying to be all things to all people and worry about what's happening at home and not what's happening in Africa or Asia, and get a grip that the Americans are next door and they're not moving. This is not like we're on some street and the neighbor moves away and there's an empty house there. They got the mansion and we got the bungalow and none of us are moving. That's how it is. So, and there's nothing wrong with being in a bungalow if you're living comfortably. And you can live in a very, very wealthy neighborhood full of bungalows if we just, roll up our sleeves and start, digging the stuff out and making something of, and go back to perhaps Carney does have the right idea about selling to ourselves, because that's what the branch plant economy was. The big difference was that the investors existed for the branch plant economy. So the General Motors and the Campbell Soups and the various other companies that had the branch plant operations in Canada, they invested the money. Yes, and they probably took a percentage of that profit out with them. But they weren't interested in selling, Admiral TVs in Arkansas. They just wanted to have the TVs made in Canada for the Canadian market. That's what we got to kind of understand. That there's nothing wrong with having a good domestic functioning market. And if
we happen to get our TV sourced in the what's the 100-mile city concept,
yes,
right? And if we happen to live where I live, and that 100 miles means that the plant is in Bellingham, maybe there's room to open up the B2 or the B1 visa or the H visa or something to get people down there to do that. It's
well, we are at the crossroads of that kind of a decision. Whether the globalist saviors like it or not. Europe isn't going to come and save us. China's not going to save us. The only people that are going to save Canada are Canadians, and our options are kind of limited. It's like again going back in time when the NHL had 6 teams. We knew the 2 teams, Toronto, Montreal, against the Chicago, New York, Detroit, and Boston. We knew the drill. Okay. And so it was a manageable thing. We gave that all away. Now we haven't won a Stanley Cup in 30 years, 40
at least.
Okay, so
93, I think. Was
okay, so there's
40 some years. Yeah,
that's my point. Is that times we've lost that. Okay, so now that's never coming back. That's gone. But we can certainly start thinking about doing things for ourselves. And if it means that somebody invests from somewhere else in the world, because you can't keep printing money and borrowing money and saying, we're investing in ourselves. There's no such thing. Someone invests in a enterprise because it's going to give dividends. Nobody does it because, gee, that's a good idea. I'm a real philanthropic kind of guy, so I'll just put a couple $100 million in to do something because you guys are so nice. No one's going to do that. This is the fairy tale nonsense that there's a bunch of folks who believe.
Coupled with that is, I think that Canada's going to have to stop looking at taxing the crap out of everybody and everything. What company in the right mind would come here and be taxed 50%? Businesses aren't in the business to pay the government.
Listen, capital is leaving Canada in droves. People are leaving Canada in droves. This is not how you do it. Okay, we're not talking about a merger here, but we sure as hell better get our economy in sync with the only place that is going to invest here or buy from us, in addition to whatever we make to look after ourselves. And we have to remember that the days of being drawers of water and hewers of wood may have to come back. And that means we do that and we turn it into something that we sell to someone who wants to buy it. Okay. And
well, there were a couple of people out here, again, BC related, oriented. We had the infestation of the pine beetle. Great misnomer. The softwood beetle, basically. It started off with the pine trees and it's moved on into the fir trees and onto other things. But when that wood died and they knocked the trees down, somebody looked at that and said, my gosh, it's blue. And that company took those logs and patented log homes and called them denim homes because it was almost a denim blue.
Really?
So I get, somebody had a little bit of smarts upstairs to see a potential. I have no idea where that company is or isn't, whether it flourished or it failed. I don't know, but at least somebody took the chance and saw something that was basically a useless product fire hazard and did something with it. And I guess that's what you're right. We have to get back and look at what's staring us in the face that we can actually market, if not to ourselves alone, what would be out there that somebody might want to buy.
We need to, as you say, rejig the economic model so that people who take risks are rewarded for their risk-taking. People who work hard don't have most of what they earn taken away, given to someone who's sitting on their duff. These are common sense things, but these are doable, and we have to start looking at leadership that cares about people and doesn't talk like they're giving lectures to some forum on banking or something. The thing that bothers me about the current leadership, particularly the Prime Minister, he doesn't talk about people. He has no sort of a feeling for the people who are looking at him and say, well, are you talking to me or are you talking to some other CEOs out there in some hallway or some convention, and you're babbling on about in a word salad that only you and the people out there who share your grifter niche understand. One of the things that a successful leader does is he's able to talk to the poor schmuck who's got to slug it out every day, get in his car or go to work and do his 8 hours and come back right. He doesn't do that. Neither do the idiots around him. I'm sorry to be so blunt, because those clowns are talking down to everybody. Whether it's the woman who is in charge of foreign affairs, pontificating about stuff that people look at her and go, "What are you talking about?" Or Melanie Joly who says, "Well, I've talked to all the CEOs and I've had a stern discussion with them." Like, what do you talk to me? I'm the guy or the gal that doesn't have a job anymore. I don't want to hear I don't need your sympathy.
I'm the guy or the gal that's actually putting the money in so that you can have a salary yourself and get around the world and pretend that you really care about me.
Yeah, I think the tone deafness there, we've talked about this before, but it really is now starting to grate on me. And, we'll see what happens on the 4th. We'll talk before then with what's coming down in the budget. But I think it's, too little, too late for a lot of stuff. I think really it's one of those situations where you, if you wanted to get a divorce, understand divorces are messy. They don't, generally speaking, they don't turn out to be amicable. If you want to kiss and make up and kind of figure out, how everybody walks away from this with some dignity, that's probably not a bad idea. And you don't have a third alternative. There's not some other suitor halfway across the Pacific or the Atlantic that's going to come and embrace us with their kindness and their money, because it's not going to happen.
No. Because the reality is that the bigger part of that equation is not Canada.
That's right.
If somebody's going to come from Europe, they're not going to drop $100 million of investment into our country. It's going to go to the place that is just south of us.
Well, look what happened in Japan. Trump just signed, a huge trade deal with Japan, and Carney wasn't even invited to meet with the new prime minister because they're just too busy. When President Xi of China talks with President Trump, you can bet that the discussion at some point will come around to, well, what about that guy north of you there in that big pink part on your map? And, it's going to be, look, this is a deal you and I have. We're not going to be pals, but I don't suggest you do too much dancing with that other fellow, because I don't want that. And when you look at the choices that China has on so many levels, whether it's trade or political, military, geopolitical stuff that goes on in Asia, those are the big boys talking. They're not going to be, either one of them has any real interest in having this little meddler
Yeah.
From the Bank of England coming around prancing, because this is a real pig in a poke that we took on. We didn't take on. The carpetbaggers brought this guy in, but we've talked about that before.
Right. Yeah, as I said today, we're sitting here trying to figure out. Okay, we've poked the bear, and somebody's trying to pull the stick out, but then we've got other individuals who are insistent upon sharpening a stake and try and poke the bear again.
Not a good idea.
And I'm thinking locally here in BC, we've got a premier that wants to do another set of TV ads for the American populace about the barrels of tariffs.
That is so stupid that it doesn't even warrant our discussion. This country from 1867 until after the Second World War was more or less under the direction of London and the British Empire snobs that ran the place. After the war, Britain was broke, and the big dogs were the Americans, not just because of the war, but because they were next door, and that was just the way it is, and they took over. Okay, that's our fate. We've had very little opportunity as a country cohesively to say, well, we're not Brits. We don't get told by Westminster what to do. No, we're not Americans. Washington's not going to tell us what to do. We're kind of in a tough spot where, the golden age was when we got to pretend to be a middle power, and we didn't piss anybody off. We just kind of stayed in our lane. And it's not to be self-deprecating, but just do what we do well, and carry on. We have to go back to that and stop trying to be something we're not, and what we're good at. Let's just keep it in the family and keep doing whatever we're good at. So that's may sound very simple, but if I go on the menu here just for a second and pick something else off, so we've got to be able to know when we've got a good hand, like what's the song? There's a song that
know when to hold them,
know when to hold them. Exactly, and I think we need to do that. And there's nothing wrong with being a wealthy middle power. Okay, we can do that. We just have to stop being condescending, and snobs don't need to run this place, and we go back to kind of the golden age of when Canada matured, and it really matured during the 50s and the 60s, and then suddenly we went off the rails again over time. So I know this is a nostalgia thing, but I think it's eminently doable. I think we get far more respect, for example, from American cousins if we said, this is what we're good at, this is who we are, without saying we're not like you and I don't like you, and the reason I think I'm better because I'm not like you. Got to stop that, So we have to go back to the John Candy days. People thought he was a great comedian, didn't even know he was Canadian.
Yeah.
Right? That would be
very much. Yeah.
It's really not that complicated. We just have to roll up. We just have to get back to work. Not worry about people halfway around the world. Worry about ourselves a little bit, and stop poking the bear.
Yeah, because that never ends well.
No, and and I'd like to be pals with the big guy next door, without worrying about whether there's some third party here that's trying to screw us over. Because that's how I feel things are happening right now.
Yeah, it's very, very evident, I think, around the country. People would just stop and take stock of it.
Well, it's like the ball game we're going to see tonight.
It's the make it or break it game.
It's the make it or break it game. And the baseball analogy is you have to think strategically when you're, having a tough time in the bottom of the ninth. Bases loaded, and you know the story.
Yeah, you You got to play the game.
That's right. And I think we can. We just have to have a smarter team. So,
yeah. Finger crossed.
Finger crossed. All right. 39 minutes, 55 seconds. I think we've covered a lot today.
Okay.
All right.
Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent remains to be seen, but that's okay.
Well, let's agree to come back on the weekend to see how things evolved in Asia. I think
that's right.
fun times are going to happen.
Pretty close to the monumental things. The Asia summits are probably pretty well done. We're going to have a budget presented in Canada, so there's going to be a lot of potential explosive situations to chit-chat about.
Well, I think we're in a hinge moment. I really do. Like I said, historians may look at this silliness that these two fellows foisted on us with that stupid ad and say, that was a point at which X or Y happened. We don't know because we can't go into the future, but we can certainly say that what happened was not helpful, as they say in diplomatic circles.
Yes, we may be PNG to not even know about it.
That's right. Oh, by the way, did you see the business that I sent you about how the Cayman Islands has decided
that a better immigration policy?
Yeah, I think.
I was starting to read that. Yeah.
Well, here's this little tiny island, and they've decided that before you can become a citizen of the Cayman Islands, you have to live there for 20 years.
They've taken an interest in their country. They think that it's worthwhile, that it's something that's worth saving, and
I was astonished.
We should be looking that way.
It was very interesting to read the improvements to their immigration and citizenship regulations, if you will, loosely. It's something perhaps that our folks might be interested in taking a gander at.
Very much, yeah.
It's not. Yeah. There's no automatic. You get to stay in the Cayman Islands, and it's interesting because they actually have a shortage of skilled people in an economy that's completely a service-oriented economy, right? Because it's banking and insurance. That's all that the Cayman Islands, and some tourism. And they don't have enough folks locally to do those things that need to be done. But they're still not going to hand you a permanent residence and citizenship, bing bang bong, just because you're there. In fact, they have a rule that if you're there on a work permit, it can only go for 9 years, and then you're out of here. It's very interesting,
Yeah.
So.
Well, again, time will tell how well that works out for them, but
Well,
I don't think it's going to hurt in the short term.
No, and it's a very racial place, so you can't just say that it's aimed at this group or that group. It's obviously there's not a lot of poverty in the Cayman Islands, but wow, 20 years before you get to be a citizen, that's amazing.
It is, but it's the standard. I mean, Portugal now is going 7 to 10. I think it's the same in the Netherlands.
Yeah. I remember that in Switzerland you had to have 10 years of residency before you could apply for Swiss citizenship.
And then there was something too, I remember, and again, hearsay, I don't know, but it was also up to a community vote. And if the community didn't vote that you were going to be a worthy citizen, you didn't get it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, right now, one of the big discussions, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll be talking about next time around, is that this chain migration issue that's been brought up in Parliament, because it's clear that what the Liberals want to do is get a lot of Liberal voters in the next election, because if you get to be a citizen after 3 years with all kinds of caveats and carve-outs, these people will likely vote for you. Didn't bring in 3.5 million East Indians because they thought this is a good idea. The idea is to make them permanent residents and then hand them citizenship. And if they don't show up, we'll give it to them anyway. It's like forced citizenship. What will happen with that if the this government fails on the budget and doesn't get reelected, it'll be very interesting. I did read that there's been 154,000 people have left Canada. Where they get these numbers from, I don't know, because as you know, we don't have exit control. So, how these various numbers are collated through whatever. I mean, I guess you could figure out if a lot of them went to the U.S., how many U.S. permanent resident visas were issued to Canadians.
Well, that and how many people are buying one-way tickets.
Yeah, but that's still, it's hard to tell. But I mean, I guess you could look at how many. I know that there's a number of cases now that are popping up on these various migration channels where people who qualify for European residence because of their ancestry. So a lot of that going on. Portugal, in fact, is one of the countries that's very much having second thoughts about this because they're getting overrun essentially. Their services and particularly Lisbon, like where you could put all these people who want to be there who don't speak Portuguese. They just showed up from the refugees from United States or Canada, or they're or retirees. A lot of retirees are saying, we're going to go back to the old country. Well, you never lived there in your life, but you've got a passport from there because Irish, for example, can do that. Italians do it all the time. So we are hemorrhaging people from Canada who are either not finding their expectations being met financially or otherwise, or they've had enough of the nonsense, particularly in the urban places with homelessness and all that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, that's for another time.
Story.
Yeah, another story. One day we may actually talk about something we know something about.
Oh, God forbid. Anyway,
all right.
Don't forget about the like button.
Please.
Don't forget to buy us a coffee.
Buy us a coffee. And keep your fingers crossed. Let's be positive. All these discussions may come to some positive end.
Hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I shall see you anon.
Anon. It's time to go and find out what's happening in the baseball game.
Yeah, that's right. Take care, Bob.
You too, Tom.